Hello, welcome to Quackalope. Thank you for being here. Today I'm bringing you a quick look, a preview, and overview of Slay the Spire, the board game, which is a tabletop iteration, a deck-building card game coming from the famed Slay the Spire, the app, the iPhone game, the digital game, which I and tons of other people in our hobby space have been obsessed with for the better part of the last few years. Slay the Spire, the app game, really reinvented and brought deck-building games where you have escalating chains of cards into a digital space in a way that I don't think I'd seen another game do it. It really committed to the idea of being a deck-building game while still saying we're going to be wild and crazy and give you combos you never could have imagined having happened if it weren't for the app running the game, if it weren't for all the math happening behind the scenes. And so there comes the question. If you don't have all the math running behind the scenes, if you don't have the depth and the complexity of, well, a digital game, of what the coding allows you to do, can you translate it and have that same experience or have that same feeling follow you to the tabletop world? And I'll get the spoiler right out of the bat. First off, if you enjoy Slay the Spire, the video game, and you're excited about the idea of a tabletop adaptation, Slay the Spire, the board game, does a ton of things you're really gonna love. It really does take the formula that was designed and then perfected in that app and brings it into the tabletop world. Now, I do have to say, you don't have the same degree of min-max and token control and chaining effects as you get in the video game, but I think that's because it would make a miserable board game. And so they've given you everything they could here. And there's still so much more to explore beyond just this prototype that I have. Unlockable cards and levels and escalation, a whole checkbox in the back of this rulebook that goes through various ways to complete missions and different challenges you can present with yourself. This is designed to be the answer to how do you bring a digital app-based deck builder into our tabletop world, and probably a great evidence for the opportunity to do the same thing in reverse. How do you take something that scales well, like Dominion, for instance, in the board game space, and then bring it up to the tabletop or the digital world? I would love to see it go both ways. So, if you're just here to find out if you should be backing Slay the Spire, if you enjoy the video game, if you'd enjoy the tabletop game, the answer is unequivocally yes. Now, let's get into the caveats, let's get into the grinding, let's get into the work, let's talk about the actual functionality of the game, what it does that's similar, and also some of the things that it does that is different. So, the similarities that you're going to have are a lot. In fact, as you start reading through the rulebook, you'll be thinking through the video game quite a bit. You're going to have a tower or a spire that you're going up. These are going to have various different chaining events that you might come across. You're going to have question marks, which would be story events that you'll be drawing from this deck of cards over here. All of these are going to give you rewards, punishments, consequences, the same little bit of flavor text that you get in the actual video game, without, of course, some of the choose-your-own-adventure style narrative twists that are included there as well. A little bit more simplified, but still fun to come across. You're going to have treasure locations, which will be flipped here with various tokens on the board. These treasure locations, if I can find one here to show you, those are all question marks. Somewhere on here, there we are. These treasure locations here are going to go ahead and give you new rewards, new cards to pick up, new upgrades to have, and new relics that get attached to your actual player board. Oftentimes, these come with either an immediate action, a constant action, or a dice-related action. These dice-related actions sometimes persist throughout the course of the event, but typically trigger either at the beginning or end of a phase. Like, my ability here is going to actually allow me to heal 1 HP at the end of combat. It's fairly simple, right? It's not one of those conditional things. It doesn't require you to have had done this thing. Instead, it just gives it to you. And that's what a lot of these treasures, a lot of these relics are going to do as well. You're going to have your fireplaces where you can upgrade cards. And actually, there's a lot of upgrade potential in these decks as well. Surprisingly enough, every single one of your cards is double-sided and brought over here in a sleeve. So you do have the chance to go ahead and perfect, change, and upgrade your deck, which does feel good and is also rewarding, just like you have in the digital game. And finally, you're going to have the different boss locations. These boss locations are going to trigger a spawn of various different types of various different levels of creatures. They'll come randomly from a deck. They'll pop down here into the timeline, and these bosses will attack you based off of a simple dice system or based off of a cube system where they're triggering one after another after another. And sometimes they'll just have a base attack, and that's all they ever do. There's not a lot of complexity to these bosses, and there's not a lot of stats that they're going to be trading back and forth. There is going to be poison and fire. There's also going to be confusion. Those 3 stats will transfer over into your deck. It'll start muddling your hand. It'll make things harder for you to process through. But the main objective of the game is to work through these more simple fights to get the whole way up to one of your various different endgame bosses. We have the Guardian, we have the Hexahost, and we have the Slime boss. These are all going to be the Act 1 bosses. Now, you are going to be journeying through various different spires. You could end after Act 1 if you want, or you could continue exploring through the entire course of as many acts and spires as you can handle. I mean, there might be an end theoretically, but it does say that you can just continue playing until you've exhausted all of either your desire or potential to continue, which means you've passed away. Along with that, at campsites, you're going to be able to do things like purchase some of these different items here. You have potions and you have relics that'll be for sale. The little mark in the bottom right-hand corner is going to show you how much they cost, and you'll gain gold and rewards from defeating various different creatures, which you'll have the rewards for when you actually take them out. The game's pretty darn similar. You're going to be tracking your own energy, your own defense, your own HP. You're going to be spending energy to play cards down into your tableau. After you've resolved all of your card play actions, your enemies will go. They'll trigger whatever attacks they have. Like I said, it's usually a fairly simple process going down the spire, depending on where you have them laid out. They'll all attack you or any of your allies, because this is a multiplayer game, which will be something we'll get to here in just a second, and then you'll rinse and repeat until you've cleared away a whole troop of enemies and continued journeying up the spire. The main objective here for Slay the Spire is to build your deck, and you'll be doing so by going through a whole skew of very powerful, very fun upgrading deck building cards. And just like the video game, one of the things that they've done right here is they've mixed in enough variation and enough recognizable but yet disparate cards in this deck that you're able to really customize and design the deck that you want. You can play with a defense stat, you can play with high attack, you can get a ton of strength, and each character does play differently depending on the type of base card set that they come with, just like you see in the original video game. You also have a whole skew of special gold cards. These gold cards are going to be your more exemplary, your more powerful deck building cards, more powerful attacks. And just like the video game, you're only going to get a few of these, but when you do get to use one, you get to build a deck around it. It feels very satisfying to trigger those high-end combinations. So you'll be journeying up, you'll be building up your deck, you'll be upgrading cards, adding cards, gaining potions, which are all one-time use, gaining relics, which give you the opportunity to either stat buff or have end of or beginning of turn abilities. Like here, you can't gain curses. Here, if you roll a 2, you're going to go ahead and gain 2 energy. Here, once per combat, you're going to go ahead and do 2 different 1 damage attacks and treat each attack as a separate 0 cost attack. So you'll be able to trigger any of these relic abilities that you have. You'll be able to fight throughout the course of the game until you finally get to the boss and try to take it down. So far, all I've described is Slay the Spire, right? We haven't really got into differences, and that's because there's really not a lot. Now, one of the major differences you're going to have here is the fact that Slay the Spire is not a solo game, which, if you asked me what I thought they were designing, I honestly probably would have responded a solo card game, a solo deck building game, because that's what the video game is. Instead, here you have a 1 to 4 player deck building card game, and I do think that this is primarily going to be a 1 or 2 player deck building card game. Even if you're going up the tower with a few different characters, I don't know that 4 players is where this is going to shine. Now, I have not had a chance to play it at 4 players. This is just all speculation, but here's some of the reasons why I'm not convinced at that higher player count, but why I'm insanely convinced at the lower player counts. Well, each one of your characters is going to have their own character dashboard, their own hand of cards. They'll be doing the same thing, going through their own personalized decks, upgrading, gaining relics, gaining potions, trying to make it to the end of the spire and defeat the boss. And the boss's level will change and his health will change depending on how many people you're playing with, so it does scale accordingly. Along with that, each one of your characters will be up this spire track over here, and as you begin playing, you'll place out the different enemy cards in a stack alongside the characters that you're playing with. And so, each character will have their own set of enemies who will be dealing Vim damage for them to face off against. Well, here's the thing. This does determine where they're going to be attacked, and it does evenly distribute the amount of potential damage that's going to be coming through, and alongside that, it does allow you to scale for player difficulty, right? You're spawning more enemies if you have more characters on the little track over here. However, every player can interact with and attack any one of the characters along the side of the board, and the big boss character will be over here to the side, and everyone's fighting him together or him on their own team. And so for me, while it does require a little bit of over-the-table communication, a little bit of conversation, you really need a group of people, preferably one other person, who's playing around the same speed as you. The nature of this being a simultaneous play deck-building game when you get up to the multiplayer scenarios means that everyone's going to be sitting there and waiting on other players to resolve their turn, and your turn is intrinsically not interesting to me, because my turn is so amazingly interesting to myself that I'm not really paying attention to the combos, the cards that you have in the game, because it is simultaneous play when it comes to attacking and resolving damage. Doesn't require you to be invested in other players, but if you have someone that has a lot of AP, you are going to run into a little bit of a holdup while you wait for them to process their deck. Or if you even have someone who has a more powerful cycle or a more powerful turn, let's say they have 15 cards in their hand to play, which is rare, I know, but let's say they have a lot of cards in their hands to play and a lot of little mitigating stats to resolve. Adding defense, subtracting defense, checking their strength, doing damage, changing damage from one location to another, wiping out a creature that you were planning to attack. There can be big moments where you sit back and wait for them to resolve the fruition of their turn, especially if your turn was 2 attack, 1 defense, done. And then you're waiting for them to continue. Now, as you get later on in the game, there is more and more stuff that both of you are doing. You do level up fairly equally, especially if you're pretty good at the deck building system and you understand the puzzle that you're trying to solve and the cards that you're going for, but you will still have those moments where one draw does not equate another player's hand draw, where you've not drawn into something that allows you to have a long, satisfying turn, and they have. And so it takes a little bit longer for them to figure out the math of the puzzle that they're trying to do, because the order that you play the cards down in this game, the order that you structure the attacks that you're making, can be really powerful and really important, especially if you're like trying to hold to what you've played like the video game does. There's no takebacks in the video game. You can't pull back a card and say, oh wait, no, if I played this stat buff beforehand and had this defense here or there, I wouldn't have taken that damage and I would have actually killed the creature. And that's just not how the video game works, and really isn't how the tabletop game should either. Outside of that, the other biggest difference that is here is just going to be the simplified nature of this game. The deck building is insanely satisfying, but it is not as satisfying as the video game is. The cards and the upgrade pathways you have are really fun to explore through, but they're never going to be quite as deep or as fun to explore through as the video game is, right? So there's a lot of things here that I would still argue are maybe more satisfying when it comes to the video game experience. However, having a hand of cards, physically playing through, being able to sit around a table, being able to engage in this game, does make this something that I am excited to pull out and play, either solo or two-player. And you might ask, why solo if I already have a video game version of this? Well, for me, there is something about the tabletop experience. There's something about the physicality of holding cards, of playing through, of moving cubes, rolling dice, and checking off all of these boxes in the back of this book that's going to keep me coming back to Slay the Spire time and time again. There's a lot of good stuff happening here, and I am insanely excited to continue bringing you more content on Slay the Spire. I think I'm planning on going through and analyzing some of the characters, giving you a better depth or breadth of understanding of just all the different upgrade pathways you have here. That's one of the videos that I'm thinking through. But yeah, I've had fun exploring this. I've had fun diving into this. I'm really excited for the Kickstarter to launch, and I hope you all are as well. I'm a big fan of the video game, and so anything that's giving me more of something that I've already fallen head over heels for, it's a good answer. Now, that being said, those of you that are watching this, let me know, in the video game, did you try all the characters first? Because I'm the one that just, like, I played through the Ironclad until genuinely there was no more upgrade possibilities for me to play through the Ironclad, and then I switched over here and played through the Silent until literally there was no more upgrade opportunities for me to go through. Now, I have tried the other characters in the game, but I'm one of those that just, I commit to one character, learn their strategy, enjoy playing through their adventure, and then once I've resolved everything I can do with them, I dove into the other characters. Also, I'm really bad at this game. On the video game, oh man, I get decimated, but I have a good time, and I think that's what matters. It might not be, it might, but I do think it is. So, Slay the Spire. Are you backing it? What more content do you want? Double check that you're subscribed down below. We'll bring you more videos as often as possible. And yeah, I'll see you over there in the Kickstarter comments, because I'm going to be hanging out. Bye.